Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon. Hope yours is going well. We've got another Seahawks video to get to today, but first, we just hit 2,290 subscribers to the channel. Shout out to all the subscribers, old and new. And as always, special tip of the cap goes to the channel members, especially elite channel members HaWKxXA, Brandon, Mikel, Rip, Scott, Todd, Hasher for MVP, VGK Tigers 75, John Harper, and Salacious Crumb. Well, it looks like we're going to keep the daily uploads going for at least one day longer because the Seahawks are actually making moves and doing things that are worthy of full discussion. So, while I said I was going to slow down the videos in this offseason, we're going to have to keep the velocity up as long as the Seahawks continue to do things of interest. And this morning, they certainly did something of interest that needs to be discussed. As of earlier today, the Seattle Seahawks gave John Schneider, the executive vice president and general manager, a contract extension through 2027. So he will be the vice president and GM of the team through at least the next 6 years, barring something happening, which does occasionally happen. Contracts get terminated early, people get fired, people leave of their own volition, people retire. But more than likely, he's going to be here for the next 6 years. And this warrants discussion because, as you guys may remember if you've been with the channel for a long time, 3 years ago I made a video about John Schneider. Actually, 2 videos. Because 3 years ago it looked like we might lose John Schneider to the Green Bay Packers. There was talk of him leaving the Seahawks that offseason to go to Green Bay, which is where he came from, and us possibly being on the market for a new GM. And I made a couple of videos at the time talking about how John Schneider had not done a very good job in the last several off seasons in general, I guess you could say, and that while I wouldn't say letting him go would be 100% a good move, I did say it is possible that it would be welcome news if he moved on and we went in another direction. So I wanted to revive that discussion because clearly there was some talk in recent weeks about him going to Detroit and trying to rebuild the Lions. And I wanted to take a look at where we are with John Schneider in the 3 years since I made those 2 videos. All right. So in order to do this, we're going to take a look at each of the 3 off seasons that John Schneider has overseen since that video series I made 3 years ago, starting with 2018. And overall, the results with John Schneider at the helm these last 3 years has been tolerable. We've gone from a 9-win team in 2017 that missed the playoffs to playoff-bound 10-win team to a playoff-bound 11-win team that won a playoff game and a division-winning 12-win team. So we've won more than we've lost. We've done a lot of good things. The team has shown improvement in some areas. A lot of the decisions they've made have proven to at least be good enough to win a lot of regular season games. Now, at a certain point, that stops being worth very much, and at a certain point, you do have to start making deep playoff runs to justify your job. But I wanted to take a closer look at what we did the last 3 off seasons because those are the 3 off seasons we've had since I had the discussion about John Schneider possibly needing to move on, possibly us needing a change of pace. So we're going to start with the draft in 2018 because that was one of the first things he did since I made that video. And you guys might remember one of the main points that I made in those 2 videos 3 years ago was he wasn't drafting well. Our draft classes since 2012 had been very bad. And we don't have a full slate of games by which we can judge these players yet, but we can give it our best shot with what we've seen so far. So we're going to start with the draft in 2018 and evaluate that. We've had 3 years to do this now. You should be able to estimate what you have after 3 years in the NFL. So Rashad Penny, bad pick. He's not a bad player, I don't think. In fact, I do think he's a good player, but he doesn't really fit what we do, and we don't need him. So right off the bat, another bad first-round pick. Not that he's a bad player, and not that he doesn't have a chance to prove something to me next year, but it didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense. Rasheem Green, not a bad pick. I like Rasheem Green. I think he came on strong at the end of this season to prove that he may yet have a little bit of stardom in him. But if you take a look at the 3 years we've had Rasheem Green collectively, he hasn't done all that much. And it seems like that pick maybe could have been used on somebody else who could have contributed more. Will Dissly, tragic story here. He looked great to start his career. First 2 seasons he did a lot, but he also got hurt a lot. We got some value out of him, and for a 4th round pick, there is something to be said for that, but I feel like the party's over with Will Dissly, and I don't know who you want to put that on. I don't know if you want to put that on John, but there's definitely some bad fortune going on here when it comes to Uncle Will. Shaquem Griffin, cool story, not a lot of production. He's done a little bit, but not exactly anything that I think was warranting of a 5th round pick. Trey Flowers, he's done some stuff. Let's just put it like that. He's done some stuff in the NFL for the Seahawks. I know he's looked bad in a lot of recent games over the last calendar year plus a little bit, but Trey Flowers, been a decent cornerback for the last 3 years. He's had moments where he looked really good. He's had moments where he's looked really bad. Ultimately, you get what you pay for, and when you spend a low 5th round pick on a safety and then convert him to cornerback, what can you really expect? All right, Michael Dixon, this is the one big punch we landed in the 2018 draft, the one unimpeachably really good pick we made. Nobody can say anything bad about getting one of the best punters in the league late in the 5th round. So this was a very nice pick. All the props in the world to John Schneider for seeing a special punter talent and bringing him in. We're a better team for it. Jamarco Jones, he's done some good stuff here in Seattle. For a 5th round pick, I'm willing to take what he's done so far and not, be too unhappy about it. But he's not really proven to me that he can be a future NFL starter. And it's just kind of a whatever pick. Jacob Martin is next. He looked pretty good his rookie year, and then we traded him in what ended up being a pretty decent trade for the Seahawks. But obviously only that 1 year of production in Seattle before he went, so whatever. And Alex Magoo hasn't gotten on the field. So this draft is it's not as bad as 2013, probably not as bad as 2014. We did land one big punch, but it was in the form of a punter. We've gotten some good players, but they haven't exactly done a ton for this team for one reason or another. I don't know if any of these guys are going to be back past their rookie contracts. For my money, the guy who's most likely to be back after Dixon, of course, would probably be Rasheem Green, and that all depends on what he does next year. Maybe Jamarco Jones can be a late bloomer, but this draft is not exactly doing John Schneider any big favors. Now, in 2018, John Schneider had to do a rebuild on the fly around a few core pieces, and he did this pretty well. There were mistakes made in there. The Tom Johnson situation early in the season was an embarrassment, and we came out of that Tom Johnson thing looking like complete morons. But when you look at an offseason where you had to dump guys like Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Paul Richardson, Jimmy Graham, etc., we did pretty well to come out of it with a slightly better team and slightly better results. The Dwayne Brown contract extension, in hindsight, looks great. I was very happy we did that. The Tyler Lockett contract extension was a steal. He's had tremendous success in the NFL since he signed that contract extension. Picking up Michael Kendricks mid-season for at least this season ended up looking like it was a pretty reasonable choice. And given how little we paid, I can't really get too upset about anything we got out of that one. We made some, bargain bin pickups like David Moore and Jerron Brown, who ended up doing pretty well. And if you look at the 2018 offseason and the results that bared fruit in the 2018 season, it was okay. We didn't do anything over the top, but we were able to squeak out a 10-win season on the back of it. And, 2018, I don't know if John Schneider proved himself, but he did all right. And then we go to 2019. Let's again start with the draft and see what we can evaluate now. We've only had 2 years, which isn't really enough time, but we can take our best shot. LJ Collier, not a terrible player, but not worth that first-round pick. Not even close. And while I do think he has the opportunity to prove himself a capable starter next year if he plays a little better, I will never really care for this pick. I don't see how this pick can really salvage itself at this point. You just don't spend first round picks on a guy who's just a capable NFL starter. And I want to give LJ some credit for doing better than I thought in 2020, but I'm not seeing the big time impact from him right now. And you just can't get me. You're not going to get me excited about this one. Marquise Blair, I don't think Carroll likes him, which makes this kind of a bad pick on its own. And one way or the other, he hasn't got on the field all that much so far. So far, big old bust. And then we get to the big punch. This may very well be the saving grace for John Schneider's work as a GM over these last several years. DK Metcalf, last pick of the second round, already made an All-Pro team, already made a Pro Bowl, started every game, insane amounts of production. He looks like he's going to shatter every Seahawks receiving franchise record if only we keep him around long enough to do it. So this was a monster pick. If you did a redraft of the 2019 draft, Metcalf would go in the top 5 probably. So, hey, I'll take the punches where I can get them. And this was a big one. This may be a career saver if you're John Schneider. Cody Barton, he has his value on special teams, and I'm not completely giving up on him when it comes to him as a defensive linebacker, but for a third-round pick, you want somebody who's got a little more upside to him, and he's all right, I guess. Gary Jennings Jr., big bust right here. Phillip Haynes, I've liked a little bit of what I've seen of him. I thought he played pretty well in the playoffs against Green Bay last year, but he's just not getting on the field, and part of it is because he can't stay healthy, and I understand that, but so far this is not looking like a very good pick. Ugo Amadi, good pick, though. He's played a decent amount since he got into the NFL, looked good on special teams, and has looked good in the slot so far. Not perfect, but I really like Ugo Amadi. This was a nice pick. Ben Burke-Irvin, been a pretty good special teamer for Seattle since he got here, which is all we really expected from him when we drafted him, so I'll say that was a decent pick. Travis Homer, we've gotten what we paid for. We used a 6th-round pick on a running back, and he's done a little bit of work for us as a receiving back out of the backfield. He's done a little bit of work for us as a kick returner. Hasn't been awful. You know, obviously, we're not going to be writing fluff pieces about how great it was to root for Travis Homer in a few years, but not a terrible pick in the 6th round. DeMarcus Christmas barely gotten on the field at all. Doesn't look like he has any future with this team, and you know, as of this point, I'm pretty sure he's not. I don't even know if he's on the practice squad anymore. And then John Ursua, who, well, depends on who you ask, but I'm not seeing anything from Ursua that makes me believe he's ever going to contribute at the NFL level. But that's what you get for your 7th-round pick. So this draft was a little better. This draft did show some good pieces. DK Metcalf is a superstar in the making, obviously. Ugo Amadi's a good slot corner. Other than that, it's not very good, but Collier may yet be a decent NFL starter. Same for Barton. Same for Hayes. So it's a slightly better draft than the previous year, and we're starting to trend in the right direction. The rest of this offseason, we did some stuff that was all right. I mean, the Ed Dixon stuff was obviously a pretty big disaster. We actually signed him in 2018, now that I think about it. He did a little bit for us that year, and then he did basically literally nothing in 2019. We moved on, so that ended up being a mess after looking back at the carnage of it. But we did go out and sign Jason Myers, who has, outside of one game, really been a great kicker for us. And since the Blair Walsh fiasco, this team has done a pretty good job addressing their special teams. They signed Sebastian Janikowski in 2018, who was okay, I guess, but Jason Myers has been money. We did the Jadeveon Clowney trade, which didn't work out as well as we had hoped, maybe. I don't know if you would consider that trade a big success anymore, but we didn't give up much to get him. Whatever little bit we had on the pass rush in 2019, we can thank Clowney for. He was one of the few things making this pass rush at least slightly credible. And then he moved on, and we didn't give him big money, and now he's basically an irrelevant NFL player. So I can't say we handled that situation terribly. It was a reasonable trade to make at the time. I don't mind what we did there. We did do the Frank Clark trade, which people have mixed thoughts on, but that did allow us to get DK Metcalf, which was probably a necessary swap that this team needed to make in order to move forward. I believe we brought in guys like DJ Fluker and J.R. Sweezy, who gave us one or two decent years of guard play while we were trying to figure out what we were going to do in the long term. Not everything worked, but overall, things were starting to trend in the right direction. Things were going a little better. Hey, I want to, but Quandre Diggs. The Quandre Diggs trade was great so far. After a year and a half after that trade, the Quandre Diggs trade looks like it was a great steal for us, and I'm behind that one 100%. So whatever credit you want to give John Schneider for that, he deserves it. And yeah, the 2019 offseason, things are starting to trend in the right direction. Now let's look at the most recent offseason, 2020. We've had very little time to evaluate the decisions made in 2020. So start with the draft. Jordan Brooks, I don't like the trade. You're not going to make me like the trade. You can't make me like this trade. I'm sorry, not trade. Draft pick. But he's not a bad player, and he has a chance to at least prove that it wasn't a terrible pick. He has a chance to be a solid starting linebacker for years to come for this team. And if that's true, then I'm not really going to get too triggered about the fact that we spent a first-round pick on him. I generally oppose using first-round picks on linebackers unless they're going to be truly game breakers, and I don't see game breaker in Jordan Brooks, but there's time for him to prove otherwise. He had a pretty decent rookie year. Let's see what he can do with a real offseason. Let's see what he can do with a full offseason. Let's see what he can do with the experience he had in 2020. Maybe he can build on it and actually do something special in 2021. So I can't say this was a bad pick yet. I can't. Well, I feel like it was a bad pick, but I can't say it with any evidence yet. The dude has played fairly well so far. Darrell Taylor, we don't know yet. Incomplete on this one. Unfortunate to use a pick on somebody who had so many injury problems, but seems like it's cleared up enough to where he has a clean bill of health going forward, at least. Damian Lewis, solid pick. He was the starter all year long. He played pretty well. I know there were some people picking apart his pass blocking, which I understand. He, as the season went on, trailed off a little bit, wasn't playing his best football, but hey, I think he showed tremendous potential as a rookie. I think he's going to develop into a great guard. He may very well be the best guard Seattle has drafted since Steve Hutchinson already. And yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. This is, if not a blue chipper, this is as close to a blue chipper as you can get without being a blue chipper. So there's another big punch. We picked up a right guard who should lock down that position for the foreseeable future in Seattle. Colby Parkinson, I am intrigued by his talent, but we didn't really get to see anything this year. I'm going to put an incomplete next to his name because there were so many tight ends on the depth chart in front of him, which isn't really his fault. So we'll see what we got next year. I'm not going to make any judgments on Colby Parkinson right now. DJ Dallas, not impressed with him at all. He did a couple of nice things in 2020, but I'm just not seeing it. And I'm not necessarily going to hold it all against him because he was a rookie and he is very raw as a player anyway, and he had no offseason, but not really seen much from DJ Dallas yet. Alton Robinson, on the other hand, I like. He's a defensive end who really came into his own as the season went on and made plays. He made some plays on those receiver jet sweeps that killed us in 2019. He made plays in the pass rush, and I feel like he has a future in the NFL as at least a rotational piece, and that's all you can expect from a guy like Alton Robinson who goes in the 5th round. So, good pick. Freddie Swain, he did some stuff in 2020. I'm not in love with him, but there's reason to believe he could become at least a bit player on a good offense. So far, we've seen some good things out of Freddie. Stephen Sullivan didn't really get on the field outside of one game where he was actually playing defensive end, and, good for him on that, but not really anything to make any evaluations on. So this draft class seems so far, from the little bit we can bear out, similar to last year in terms of its goodness. It's decent. It's not good. But some of that is just because it's too early. We can't say anything about Darrell Taylor yet. Can't say that much about Jordan Brooks yet. Can't really say anything about Colby Parkinson yet. But there's some potential here, and there are some players who played really well as rookies in 2020. And look, the rest of the 2020 offseason, there were some misses. The Greg Olsen and Jacob Hollister 1-2 was a disaster. We spent almost $11 million on the tight end position and only to get basically nothing out of it in 2020. However, we did bring back Jarran Reed, who ended up having a pretty good year. That contract we gave him no longer looks like a joke like it did earlier in the season. So, hey, Jarran Reed earned his money by the end of the year, I think. He played really well in the playoff game, one of the few players on the team who did. Letting guys like Quentin Jefferson go, that ended up looking not so bad. A lot of the players we let go went to their new teams and did very, very little. So I think the players that we let go this offseason, I don't think we're really regretting any of that. The Dunbar trade was a reasonable risk. It didn't pan out, but I can't really hold that too much against John. We didn't give up a ton, but what a headache that ended up being. The Jamal Adams trade, we probably gave up too much, but Jamal's a very special player, and he's going to be a big part of this team's success going forward over the next 5+ years, at least, I think. And overall, you would say that his work in 2020 has been pretty good. The Carlos Dunlap trade bailed out this defense, and however disappointed you are with the final result of the 2020 season, I'm right there with you, but it would have been a lot worse if he didn't make the Dunlap trade at the buzzer, which we gave up very little and got a very good pass rusher that made Jerron Reed a better player and made the whole defense as a whole much better. So we've seen steps in the right direction from John Schneider since I made that video series 3 years ago. He's drafted at least somewhat better, if not great. I'll give him a little bit of credit for at least landing some punches after not really landing any for several years. We've made some trades that have helped this team win, even if some of them you can debate what we gave up versus what we got in return. We've certainly had some busts like Greg Olsen. You could maybe throw Barkvarius Mingo in there, although even that was a fairly cheap one. Ed Dixon was obviously a bit of a mess. And like I said, the Tom Johnson thing was embarrassing. But we've also gotten good contributions out of very cheap players like David Moore. Maybe you throw Jerron Brown in there. I think there is some stuff to hang your hat on over these last 3 years. The Russell Wilson contract, I know people may not be feeling the best about that right now, but at the time we gave it to him, it was reasonable and we had no choice. So I'm not going to hold that against John, really. And basically what I'm trying to say here is that John still needs to get better, but he has been making steps forward since I called him out 3 years ago. So I don't want to say I'm happy about the fact that he's going to be here for the long term, but of all the things to blame on this team right now, I think John Schneider is near the bottom of that list. I will hold him accountable for some of the mistakes he made, but on the whole, he's done a pretty good job fielding a capable team around a very big QB contract. So with that in mind, if you guys want to air grievances against John Schneider in the comments section, please do that. If you want to defend him, you can also do that as well. Believe me, there are some decisions he has made over the last couple years that I didn't really mention that are not looking stellar right now, like, say, maybe the Bobby Wagner extension. But on the whole, he's gotten the players that are putting this team in the position to play well. Now, if you want to blame him for Carroll sticking around for the next 4 or 5 years, maybe you can do that, but I think that's a slightly different discussion. So let me know what you guys think. Peace out. Go Hawks. See you guys in stream later today. And like it or not, looks like these guys are sticking around for a little while longer. Peace.